If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
Hi, it's Eva Longoria, and let's be real. After 40, we should ask for more from our skincare. I swear by Revitalift Triple Power Moisturizer by L'Oreal Paris. With vitamin C, pro-retinol, and hyaluronic acid, it reduces my wrinkles, firms, and brightens. And it's not a procedure. It's just a hard-working moisturizer.
Revitalift Triple Power Moisturizer by L'Oreal Paris. Grab it today in fragrance-free or with SPF 30. Available at your local Target.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
Welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani's New York City mayoral win is causing deep concern for law enforcement, as Mamdani frequently called for defunding the police and even labeled them as racist and anti-queer and more. He also wants to eliminate a key strategic response group, which often went to those unruly protests on the streets of the Big Apple and on college campuses. So what is ahead for law enforcement under Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani? Well, joining us now to discuss this is Joe Imperatrice. He is one of the co-founders of Blue Lives Matter NYC. He also has 18 years of law enforcement experience, having served in several specialized units, and he is one of America's top law enforcement experts. Joe, it's great to have you here.
It's always great to be with you, Rita.
How troubling is Mayor-elect Mamdani and his policies for police?
Well, I think after the win this week, I think several law enforcement officers, along with the residents of New York City, are having a hard time sleeping with the way that he's campaigned, sticking to his goals, right, which you have to give him credit because he really hasn't gone too far off topic, and winning on them, and wondering in the coming year, will he dismantle the greatest police department in the world? My fear being in law enforcement is a replay of the de Blasio years. 8 years of wondering, was a mayor going to come after his cops or was he going to support them? Am I going to wake up tomorrow and find out one of my brothers or sisters was shot in the line of duty and killed? Will certain key units be taken away that you really do play a big part in the safety of New York City? Will there be headhunting, meaning will people be going after the officers' jobs, whether it be CCRB or department advocate or whatever the case may be? Police officers need a friend in City Hall. It needs to be a group effort between district attorneys, police officers, and the mayor and his staff. The number one goal should be public safety. But unfortunately, it's hard to predict because the gentleman hasn't gotten to office yet. But what he said, it's very unpredictable at this point.
You know, you brought up Mayor Bill de Blasio, and of course the cops famously turned their back on him during the funeral after those two officers were executed. I know the law enforcement was very frustrated with Bill de Blasio. For some reason, this guy even feels worse, very much, and I think his rhetoric is even much worse. Your thoughts?
Living through it, I was there at Rafael Ramos's wake when that happened. It's hard. You know, the job that the men and women in blue do all across this nation is not easy. Going out there every day and being given a gun and a badge and being told you could take a life or save a life in a matter of seconds. But then when you're Monday night quarterbacked by activists and judges and politicians, right, it's hard. You know, officers really do go out there, the overwhelming majority, to do the job that people ask them to do, to make communities safer. You don't do it for the money. And you definitely need the backing of individuals. New York City is a huge city, right? As you know, it's the greatest city in the world, and everyone watches from around the world. If something good happens, it gives another state or a country or a city a reason to do things good. But also the reverse. When bad things are happening, it gives other cities and states reasons to do bad things as well. So, you know, we don't know where the dominoes are going to land, and you just hope it's not going to be as bad as many people predict.
Do you believe also just even some of the pre-comments that he made over the years? I mean, it's over and over again in writing where he talked about defund the police, open up jails. It seems the rhetoric is even more heightened than what we saw under Bill de Blasio, I feel.
It is, and a lot of it doesn't make sense, right? You know, even Governor Cuomo, which I don't completely agree with, during one debate says, what are you going to do? Just let 7,000 people out? That's unrealistic. Where are they going to go? These are people that's going to flood into our city streets. You know, it's going to make the jobs of officers much harder, and it's going to create more victims. It just does not make sense. You know, there's always room for reform. There's always room to make things better, but you have to do it with common sense.
How important it is also, when you look at, you just talked about, you know, the NYPD, I think 35,000 officers. I mean, it's a massive police department. How important is it to keep up that number? One of the things I think is so troubling, he kind of played around a little bit with, oh, no, I'm not for defund the police, even though he clearly said it in writing over and over again. And he also made it clear he wasn't hiring new officers. That was one thing. You know, Cuomo was talking about bringing in ex-new officers. Even Mayor Adams actually brought in a whole bunch more, almost to cause the buffer, you know, to have more officers before Mamdani takes over. But how important is it to have full staff? I mean, you can't to feel like you're hamstrung, especially at a time where the city's growing, although it may not under this guy.
It's tremendous. You know, we need not only the officers, the amount of officers, but qualified officers, getting good candidates, keeping the great experienced officers and detectives that go out there every single day to be able to help the newer breed of officers go out there and do the job the right way. The buffer between the supervisors, you know, and the seasoned officers that are going to go out there and get the job done. So it's not just about the numbers, which in New York City, my personal opinion, needs to go back to about 2002 when we were close to 40,000, if not higher. And when you think about it on top of that, 8.3 million New York City residents on top of the people in and out every day, is 40,000 even enough? When you really do break it down, it's not. So will there ever be enough officers? I don't think so, but the experience definitely matters.
What's the difference by adding and getting up to 40,000 versus keeping it flat? How much of a difference does that make?
It's big because people don't realize the staffing shortages that we have. There are protests and details and parades every single day that officers are being sent to. Where are you getting them from? You're pulling them from detective squads. You're pulling them from patrol. The cases that are coming in, the reports that come in every single day and don't stop, right? Who's solving them if these individuals are on the street worrying about parades and protests? So the numbers really do matter to get the job done efficiently and properly on a daily basis.
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
Hey there, it's Dr. Sanjay Gupta with some exciting news to share. CNN is now streaming. That means you can read, watch, and stream everything in one subscription. You can watch news live 24/7. You can also explore catch-up videos and explainer videos. And you can also watch a library of CNN's originals, including my latest documentary, It Doesn't Have to Hurt. Just go to cnn.com/all access.
You know, one of the things you just brought up, protest, Joe, and of course you think about the Strategic Response Group. That's the group that you know all too well responds to a lot of these different protests, whether they're on the streets, whether they're the many ones that we saw on various college campuses like Columbia and elsewhere. And yet Zohran Mamdani says, I'm going to be canceling that SRG, the Strategic Response Group, because he also has come out and said that he believes most of these protests are all First Amendment. Obviously, some of them are, but a lot of them also get unruly. So it's also symbolic in his mind that, you know, okay, a lot of people are wondering, is he going to let these protests roam wild when he becomes mayor and then tell the police to stand down and then there won't be this strategic response group even to respond to it?
That would be like de Blasio 2.0, where even Mayor de Blasio wouldn't even let the horses and the mounted unit show up at specialized details and protests, which are a major tool for any law enforcement agency. You know, those are highly trained officers, right? This department, along with many others, needs it to go out there and get the job done properly. They're there in seconds, in minutes, depending on how bad it is. And as in New York City, the average person doesn't realize that there are multiple protests all throughout the 5 boroughs every single day of the week. But then look at a No Kings protest when suddenly 100,000 or 200,000 people show up. Where are you pulling the officers to keep the people safe? That is the question. And if Mayor Mamdani-elect has a better solution to keep people safe, I think any law enforcement professional is all ears to it. But the probability of that happening is probably very slight.
Yeah, and it comes at the same time where he's obviously been critical of police, saying that they're overreaching. He seems to be very obsessed with discipline of police officers. It's troubling when you hear that, Joe.
It is. Listen, at the end of the day, if an officer does something wrong or criminal, they have no business wearing that uniform. I'm totally for that. There needs to be checks and balances, and there has to be oversight to the highest extent possible, especially when you're given a weapon, right? You're given a firearm, expected to perform at all times. But there are certain situations where officers either make mistakes or even when the body cam is there, no matter how bad it looks, policing is not always pretty. When someone is fighting the cops or cursing them out or trying to get away because they don't want to go to jail, it's not a pretty sight sometimes. And officers are trained to use the necessary minimum amount of force to get somebody in handcuffs. You cannot criticize an officer for doing their job and making sure that not only they go home safe, but everyone else, when someone on the other side resisting arrest is raising the bar, and you're trained. You're taught in the academy certain things you can and can't do. So once again, it goes back to common sense, and I just hope this gentleman can use that going forward.
One of the things he talked about also was sending the disciplinary action away from the ultimate authority being the NYPD commissioner and moving it back to the CCRB. For folks, it's a Civilian Complaint Review Board. And a lot of people believe the people there at the Civilian Complaint Review Board are sort of mini Mamdanis, if you will. They're not folks who necessarily, as you know, rise up through the police academy and understand how tough it is to be a police officer. How concerning is that if he does indeed do that and move sort of the authority of oversight of cops to a group of, folks who maybe have the same views he does?
Speaking on behalf of Blue Lives, no police agency in this nation should have an individual or individuals that never put on the uniform be in charge of the criminal and disciplinary process of any officer. My opinion should be previous officers, right, that are retired, lawyers, and people that understand law practice and police practice. A lot of individuals in CCRB come out of college. They've never been officers. Some of them are part of the protests that we see around the city against officers. So there is a bias to begin with. There's many times officers have done the job properly, and they've recommended for an officer to get into trouble. And that's when the police commissioner gets to look at it and say, no, my officer did things the right way. But there have been many situations that police commissioners have passed also see it and say, no, this officer did not do this right. And there should be something that should be implemented, and the officer should be disciplined. So at the end of the day, it should fall on the police commissioner of that agency to make the final determination.
You just brought up an interesting point too, Joe, that some of the people on this board are actually part of the protests against cops?
Yes, ma'am. It's been proven.
Wow. So they're actually out there on some of the scenes and some of these, Black Lives Matter or whatever it is?
Yeah, no, listen, they have every right to, right? Everyone has that amendment to go out there and do it. But when there's a bias involved, there should be a deep consideration for that, because God forbid a police officer was caught being biased, right? We've seen it over and over again. The public wants to fry them. So if you're going to hold police officers to the highest of standards, I would expect everyone in every other profession should be as well.
That's a great point. I agree. And, as we're hearing all this, too, it was troubling, Joe Imperatrice, when Mamdani brought up a sort of the standard that he had for bringing in or keeping, in this case, he brought up again today, this week, that he would like to keep Jessica Tisch, the NYPD commissioner. Obviously, we'll see if she wants to stay or go or not. But one of the things he brought up as sort of the first reason, and he said this, I remember, it was during one of the debates, was because he felt she sort of reined in and she was active in disciplining, sort of cleaning up the police department during Mayor Eric Adams, as if almost that was the priority for him for picking the police commissioner. And then, safety was, far down, sort of second tier. When you hear that, that's also troubling.
At the end of the day, right, since the beginning of time, police agencies are out there to keep people safe. That is what we should go back to. We should take out the fluff and make sure that the citizens, especially in this great city, feel that way. I've worked in all 5 boroughs at one time or another, and everyone from Staten Island to the Bronx wants the same thing. They want proper, respectful, and professional policing, but they want policing. And more times than not, they want more policing. I wish that we can go back to the days under Commissioner Bratton of Operation Impact, when we would flood cops into areas on foot, right? It would be high visibility, and it would deter crime, but it would also give officers the opportunity to meet the people on that street corner, in those neighborhoods, get a reputation with them. No one ever spoke about that, but it was actually done. It was the community policing before they came out and made new units about community policing. So it worked in so many different ways. So not only did you deter crime, but people saw in those communities the same officers, the same faces every day, and they actually helped the cops get their job done.
Yeah, that's right. It's creating that great relationship, which is very, very important. The other thing, too, also when I think of Bill Bratton, Joe, I also think of the broken windows theory. And, of course, he was very big into making sure if somebody did a crime, holding them accountable, because then it doesn't lead up to the next crime and the next crime, sort of breaking the cycle, which you understand all too well, how important that is. Are you worried that under Mamdani, are many officers worried that he, sort of the philosophy is a little bit of turn a blind eye, if you will. If you look at sort of the Democratic Socialists of America, it's the defund the police, they open the jails, the legalizing of prostitution. I mean, there's a lot of these things that people go, whoa.
It'll make the job a lot harder, but how the heck is a police officer going to look a victim in the eyes when they had the worst day of their life, when they were victimized, and say, sorry, there's nothing we can do? What kind of a look is that when they can't go out there and get justice or feel protected or know that someone's going to get held accountable for doing the worst thing ever to this poor person? That's what really upsets me. Once again, it's going to continue, unfortunately, that you're making the criminals the victims and the victims the criminals, or the person, why you're reporting this. It shouldn't be that way. And going back to common sense is when you find out you have cancer, right, there's a program you get put on, right? There's services you're going to get and treatment. You cut out the cancer as soon as possible so that you have the best chance at cleaning up your body and surviving for many more years. Why would you allow criminals to go out there and cause havoc every single day when if you just removed the problem, held them accountable and took them off the street, brought them in front of a judge, if in a perfect world, the judges then did their job and held them in and reprimanded them? How does that not make sense? I'll never forget it. One of my best commanding officers ever, when I was a very young cop on this job, said, we don't realize how much of an impact you're making for the people in these neighborhoods that are such great people. When you take that bad guy off the street, even if it's for a few hours, they get to walk on their streets and not have to worry that they're going to get robbed or there's going to be a drug transaction or there's going to be a shooting. You make so much more of an impact than you will know as a police officer when you're allowed to go out there and do your job.
Yeah, and save the community, just like you said. It gives them a level of comfort, and yet some of the policies that we've seen from the Democratic Socialists is essentially open up the jails. And in fact, Mamdani, not that long ago, and you see it on videotape, he sits there and says, well, what purpose do jails serve? Prisons, it just makes people feel better. It makes people feel safe, right?
It makes them feel safe. And going back to the victims, right, there's so many crimes that could be prevented if you'd allow police officers across this great nation to be proactive. And to sit there and know that there's an individual that gets shot and killed or stabbed or raped and beaten, right? And to know that cops could have done something if you had the right leader in place, that's what's going to hurt a lot of people down the road. That's what people are going to question. Why am I staying in this city? Why am I putting my family at risk? Or they're going to have the guilt of I stayed here and I should have left and my loved one would have still been here. So this is a fine line. This is a president that, in a while, we haven't been to, and it was a nice little break having Eric Adams there for 4 years because he was, at the end of the day, very pro-law enforcement and cleaning up the streets. It was not a good time under Mayor de Blasio. So I think everyone is just holding their breath, hoping that by some chance it doesn't go back to what it was, if not worse.
And before I let you go, Joe, also we heard Mamdani famously say, well, I'm going to send a social worker. I'm going to let an operator decide whether or not to send the social worker or a police officer. I mean, I have a lot of respect, of course, for the 911 operators, but they're not there on the scene. You understand that all too well. What happens if you send a social worker on a domestic violence case? Things turn awfully dangerous very quickly.
Well, being that domestic violence calls are one of the most dangerous jobs an officer can ever go to, that needs to be heavily considered if this is even going to go into account or a procedure in place. There are things that officers do that probably they shouldn't have to do, responding to certain alarms or whatever the case may be, right? Noise complaints to an extent. There's things that officers can have things taken off their plates. They can actually focus on crime. But there are others that we have to heavily consider and use our heads where will this be the right thing to do or will this be the wrong thing to do? Will it make things better or will it make them worse? So I just hope that whatever is put into place in the future is really considered and especially taken into account the law enforcement professionals that know best. And I guess we'll just go from there. But I hope that common sense is used at the end of the day.
Yeah, I know a number of officers have even said that that's often even more dangerous if you send a social worker, even if the intention might be a good one to send them, because then they got to worry not only about the perp, but they got to worry about protecting the social worker too as well.
Yeah, there's so many times that an officer or officers, because you don't respond alone to that, respond to a house. And before you know it, someone's on your back, and that person that's on your back fighting you is the person that called. There's someone hiding behind a door with a weapon. There's been several times that an officer was flagged down the street, and they said, hey, my husband or my wife just left with a firearm. I don't know where they went. And a few minutes later, there's shots fired. So what is going to happen when a person shows up that's unarmed that now becomes another victim, that now becomes barricaded or a hostage? These are things that have to be looked at and considered, right? And there needs to be facts. But the fact is that it is one of the most dangerous jobs an officer all across the nation to respond to, and we have to consider that.
100%. And everybody, be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast. Joe Imperatrice, thank you for all you do. And also Blue Lives Matter NYC. How can people find out more about your great organization and help our men and women in blue?
Going to bluelivesmatternyc.org. The main concern is to help the families of officers killed in the line of duty or diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. And more than ever, officers are going to need support. They're going to have to know that people have their back. They're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And they really do appreciate the work they do every single day.
Well, we love our men and women in blue, and we're so thankful that there's so many great Americans like you out there who are protecting us every single day. Joe, thank you. It was great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.
It's easy to get stuck reaching for the same familiar fruits and vegetables, even when you know a colorful variety is key. Balance of Nature's fruits and veggie supplements don't replace fruits and vegetables, but it makes it easy to add more variety to what you already eat. With 31 ingredients that are whole fruits and vegetables, switching it up is easy because we've already taken care of the hard part. Go to balanceofnature.com and get a free fiber and spice supplement, plus 35% off your first set as a new preferred customer by using discount code POD.